Friday night you and your boys went out to eat. Then they hung out, but you came home around 3. If 6 of y'all went out, then 4 of you were pretty cheap. Yeah. 'Cause only 2 of you had dinner. Found your credit card receipt.
What's up, everyone? It's Books&Looks TV. I'm going to be talking about Whitney Houston overall and the questions of her blackness and authenticity. And I'm also going to be talking about just her career overall. She was depicted as black and how she defined herself in some ways, and just how the general public kind of questions people's identity based on the spaces that they're in or white proximity. I'm also going to just throw in, before I get into this, I thought it was kind of interesting how Halle Bailey recently posted a picture with her boyfriend, similar to Bobby Brown, is considered kind of like a bad boy. The fact that Halle is similar to Whitney in the sense that she has this great vocal voice and she had challenges. Halle got to be in this space because of her voice and, in my opinion, because of how she looks. So Halle Bailey is obviously a black woman, but she does have features similar to Whitney Houston's, like a slim, petite frame and a narrow nose, etc. And I do think that she's beautiful in general, but also the fact that her voice carries a lot of her talent and ways for her to even navigate into spaces like Disney. And ironically, I feel like when Halle chose DDG, again, people were like, oh, this is our sweetheart. How can she be with this guy? We can only go over the public persona of what DDG represents. But I remember DDG saying, well, how do you guys know that I'm a bad person? Like, I could be pure just like her. But I think in a sense, yes, DDG has done some public stunts that looks as bad. I think in general, when black women choose to partner with black men, particularly black men who don't meet this certain aesthetic or demeanor of what we consider politically correct, that those women like Whitney Houston and Halle Bailey kind of have like a tarnished image. So this is just my prelude if you wanted to throw up this comparison, because I think it's really important. But the voice is one of the key elements I want to talk about today when we think about blackness. And so let's get into Whitney Houston's career. Throughout Houston's career, she has pretty much been reduced to her vocal instrument. It has defined both her success when her voice was most powerful and her decline when her voice failed. And I would say that was greatly due to probably a lot of trauma, but also her usage of drugs. Houston is similar to other female African-American superstars like Diana Ross and Beyonce in the way she has adopted a glamorous crossover pop image that transcends musical categories such as blackness, soul, and R&B, often resulting in the criticism that she has sold out or is too white. Yet Whitney Houston differs from people like Diana Ross and Beyonce in the way her voice is the most dominant in the construction of her star persona. And this is stated by Job Kujman. And I think that this quote was really important. Most people will say Whitney Houston, again, was the voice. And it's just really interesting to me that despite her having this great voice, how at least in her earliest stage, that she was criticized as being too white, or that she could even be booed at an award show. So today I want to talk about like the difference between pop and R&B, and I'm going to talk about Whitney's success as a pop star, her crossover appeal, her black identity and how it was questioned, and a general conclusion. Pop and R&B is often defined usually by race. I think a lot of times people put white, or let's just say music professionals, whatever, put pop as like this happy amazingness, upbeat music. And it's usually considered white, or the masses are white, the people who sing it are white. And R&B has like this sultry tempo, and it's usually associated with blackness. And so Whitney Houston at the time was considered a pop singer. Pop music in general sometimes is identified as like popular music. But again, when it comes down to the award shows and how it's categorized, race is, to me, is generally the biggest aspect of pop music compared to R&B. Whitney Houston was someone, again, who was able to navigate into that space. And I think that's where a lot of black people sadly question her blackness. So in 1985, Whitney Houston released her debut album, Whitney Houston, which was an instant success and sold over 12 million copies worldwide. She had 4 consecutive #1 singles on that album: Saving All My Love for You, How Will I Know, and The Greatest Love of All. In 1987, Houston released her second album, Whitney, which was more successful than her first album. It sold over 20 million copies worldwide and had 7 consecutive #1 singles, making Whitney Houston the first artist to achieve this. In 1990, Whitney Houston released her third album, I'm Your Baby Tonight, which continued her commercial success, selling over 8 million copies worldwide. So now I'm going to get to my third point, which talks about her superstardom and crossover appeal. So Whitney Houston became an international representative of America when she performed the ballad One Moment in Time during the opening ceremony of the 1988 Olympics Games in Seoul, and the American national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, at the 1991 Super Bowl, right at the beginning of the Gulf War. When you get to be in those type of spaces, not only is it acknowledging your star power, but it's also acknowledging your voice. In places like sports, where it's like the central theme of the United States, what people value, whether it's the Olympics and battling like various countries throughout the world, or when it's something as powerful as football, that's likely to say that you made it again as the voice, and it can supports the commodity of being like this product. In a sense, I feel like Whitney Houston's voice was commodified. Usually, I haven't really seen that many people who are very soulful doing these type of things, unless it's like some guy in The Bodyguard. So this was like a romantic thriller film that came out in 1992. The co-star was Kevin Costner, and this film was critical and a commercial success, and it grossed over $411 million worldwide. And of course, the soundtrack was amazing. And I could say now it's been more accepted for like interracial couples, especially like Black women being with non-Black men. But at that time, especially like, I feel like in the 90s, there was this like huge Afrocentric theme, like being proud and being Black. And so when you see someone like Whitney Houston on like a stage, and she's with a white guy, I feel like a lot of Black people probably became detached from her, or felt like that contributed to her quote unquote selling out. Aside from that, Whitney Houston won many awards, whether it was Grammy Awards for Best Pop Vocal Performance, Record of the Year, or Album of the Year, or American Music Awards, whether it was in pop and rock. From like, again, the late 80s to 90s, she also won several #1 hits in Billboard Music Awards. This isn't to say that there weren't, of course, Black people who love Whitney Houston and value Whitney Houston, but I think in a sense she was kind of seen as untouchable or kind of removed from us, but with a Black face. And there are people, again, who have talked about this. And so as Job Kujman explains in his book, rather than accusing individual African-American pop stars of selling out, people like Nelson George blamed the 1980s music industry for commodifying Black popular music by turning it into crossover music. In the introduction to his 1988 book, The Death of Rhythm and Blues, he singles out Whitney Houston as the embodiment of the commercial blandness that has come to define Black music. He says, Houston is extremely talented, but most of her music is so quote-unquote colorblind, such a product of the 80s crossover marketing that in her commercial triumph is a hollowness of spirit that mocks her own gospel roots. In other words, Houston does not embody whiteness but blandness, as she has been commodified, reduced to a multi-million selling product. I think that's kind of harsh to say, but again, that is how some people felt at that time. And so now I'm going to look at more so how Whitney identified herself, just some other things that kind of made people think, well, maybe Whitney is quote unquote Black or with us, or maybe she hasn't sold out. And I argue that Whitney announcing that she was proud to be Black in multiple interviews.
A lot of your Black audience has been a little bit critical in the last year about your singing songs that were less in the soul tradition or in the gospel tradition, that you went a little too far to the pop side. How do you feel about that kind of criticism?
I don't know. What do they want? What do they want me to do? I think music is music, I mean, how do I sing more Black, or how do I sing? What am I doing that's making me sound white? I don't understand. I'm singing music from my heart, from my soul, and that's it.
And actually being saddened that she wasn't fully accepted by the Black community possibly made people realize, okay, Whitney's okay. I would also argue that Whitney deciding to marry Bobby Brown, a Black man who, again, I've stated in the past, is non-ambiguous, of course, dark-skinned, and more so was considered a bad boy, kind of put her in the middle ground. Some people probably questioned, what is she doing with him? And again, I've said in another video, a lot of times they blame Bobby Brown when Whitney Houston wasn't at her best. And also, I feel like people felt like she could have done better than Bobby Brown. As I said earlier, that's how a lot of people feel about Halle Bailey, who a lot of people consider America's sweetheart as the quote-unquote acceptable Black woman. On one end, it seemed like, okay, her marrying Bobby Brown made her more accepted to the Black community. Yet I think as a pop star, she probably couldn't navigate white spaces the same. Instead, I feel like she was viewed as a spectacle. In 1995, Houston starred in the drama film Waiting to Exhale alongside Angela Bassett and Loretta Devine. This film is a box office success that grossed over $100 million worldwide. Houston's soundtrack contribution, Exhale, became a #1 hit single. This is like one of the first times you see Whitney Houston actually surrounded by Black people. Not to say that she didn't grow up around Black people, but in the mainstream media, this is one of the first times you see her around a movie that was strictly about Black women relationships. So I feel like that kind of solidified her Blackness in a sense to the public. Then she had a follow-up movie, The Preacher's Wife, that came out in 1996, which was also a commercial success that grossed over $60 million worldwide. So in The Guardian, there's an article called Whitney Houston Not Black Enough, and it explored the criticism Houston faced for her perceived lack of authenticity and her failure to adequately quote-unquote represent the Black community. She says, sometimes it gets down to, you're not Black enough for them. You're not R&B enough. You're very pop. The white audience has taken you away from them. And this was Whitney Houston reflecting on the first significant setback of her career when she was booed at the 1989 Soul Train Awards. So again, I told you I was going to talk about how I feel like her marrying Bobby Brown and her substance abuse kind of shooed her away as that Black girl who could sing, but we're no longer interested in. I'm going to get to the drug abuse now. So in 1993, rumors began to circulate about how Whitney Houston had alleged drug use. And these rumors intensified over the next few years as Whitney Houston's public appearances became increasingly erratic and her performances started to suffer. So in 2001, Whitney Houston struggled with substance abuse. It became more public knowledge. She started to give bizarre interviews on the Today Show, and she was arrested for possession of marijuana. In 2002, she entered a rehab treatment for her drug addiction, and she emerged from rehab seemingly focused and determined to get her life back on track. But to me, in these points of her life, when she decided to marry a Black man, in my opinion, and became addicted to drugs, not only did the public mock her, but I feel like especially mainstream media, you would see where people would record her when she was obviously high or when she didn't look her best.
Whitney dying, crack rehab fails.
First of all, let's get one thing straight. Crack is cheap. I make too much money to ever smoke crack. Let's get that straight, okay? We don't do crack. We don't do that. Crack is whack.
And again, I feel like at those times, people distanced themselves from her, or they didn't just hold her on a pedestal. It was kind of just saying oh, she's just another Black crack addict. And so, in my opinion, of course, that wasn't real, but you can kind of see how she was kind of, to me, exploited and used. My conclusion is, it's obvious that Whitney Houston is known for her voice. And I think it's kind of sad that someone who comes from New Jersey, who was raised in a Black church, who is obviously Black and identifies as Black, couldn't just be a successful singer. She had to be scrutinized, just like I feel like Halle is to this day. I keep bringing up Halle because to me, again, she has a phenomenal voice, and her partner is often scrutinized as well. And a lot of people have said, oh, I wish Halle Bailey would have just married a white guy. That would have helped her career, etc. Why can't Black people just be with Black people or be with who they want to be with? So the fact that, or some people can accept Whitney Houston when she's alongside a white guy in a film, just like Halle Bailey, it kind of makes you wonder, does assimilation have to always be the key to success in a lot of people's eyes? And overall, why can't people just be proud to be Black, as Whitney Houston said? Why does being black have to have like this narrow view for many people. So that's all I wanted to say about this topic. Let me know what y'all think down below. And thank you for listening to Books and Looks TV. I'll see y'all next time.